Hadrian McKinnon stood on the back porch of his grandparents' farmhouse, sipping his morning coffee as the rising sun painted the horizon in shades of orange and pink. The air was cool and crisp, carrying with it the sweet scent of honeysuckle and freshly cut grass. It was Hadrian's favorite time of day, a peaceful respite before the demands and stresses of real life came crashing in. Several minutes passed and Harper failed to appear, tail wagging, ready for her breakfast. Hadrian called again, louder this time, but still no sign of the chocolate lab. A knot of unease began to form in Hadrian's stomach. It wasn't like Harper to wander far or stay out for long. He set his mug down on the porch railing with a clink and jogged out into the misty fields, shouting Harper's name. Nothing but the twitter of songbirds and the buzz of cicadas answered him. Trying to tamp down his growing worry, Hadrian headed for the trail that led into the woods lining the river. Maybe Harper had gotten distracted chasing a rabbit or fox and lost track of time. He scanned the ground, searching for her familiar paw prints in the damp earth, but found only his own sneaker treads from his run the previous evening. "Harper, come?" Hadrian's voice took on a sharper, more commanding tone as he passed the boundary of trees. The bird calls and insect noises seemed to hush, as if the forest creatures sensed his distress. He continued forward, leaves and twigs crunching under his feet, straining his ears for the jingle of Harper's collar tags. When he reached the rocky riverbank, Hadrian stopped short, pulse thudding. There by the water's edge lay Harper's red leather collar, clasp broken, tags missing. He snatched it up with trembling hands. Harper never took off her collar, and she certainly couldn't have removed it herself, not with it fastened tight around her furry neck. Cold dread sluiced through Hadrian's veins. Someone had taken his dog. And why? Frantic now, Hadrian combed the area, examining the ground for clues. The pebbly earth bore signs of a scuffle, clumps of fur, gouges from Harper's nails as she struggled against her captor. But the tracks were muddled, indecipherable. If only Ambrose were here, Hadrian thought desperately. His brilliant ex-boyfriend would know what to do, how to find Harper. But Ambrose had left Paris weeks ago, taking his inventions and his keen investigative mind with him, not bothering to say goodbye. Helplessness and anger surged through Hadrian. Anger at the heartless monster who kidnapped his beloved pet. Anger at the police for brushing him off when he reported Harper missing, claiming they had bigger problems to deal with. And anger at himself for still pining after Ambrose, who made it crystal clear when he moved away that Hadrian was nothing more than a meaningless fling. No, Hadrian resolved, swiping away the frustrated tears blurring his vision. He refused to sit around moping and feeling sorry for himself. He would find Harper on his own, without the cops or Ambrose or anyone else. He was all she had. For the next several days, Hadrian plastered missing dog posters on every telephone pole and shop window in Paris. He went door to door grilling his neighbors, but no one had seen or heard anything unusual. The other dogs in town were all accounted for. It's like Harper vanished without a trace. Hadrian's worry metastasized into full-blown panic. Horrible scenarios ran through his head on a loop. What if Harper was hurt or scared or calling out for him? What if the kidnapper abandoned her in the middle of nowhere to fend for herself? What if they killed her? He lay in bed at night, sick to his stomach, praying she was still alive. A week after Harper first disappeared, a crisp white envelope appeared in Hadrian's mailbox. No postage, no return address. With his heart in his throat, Hadrian tore it open and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. It contained a typed message. $10,000 for your dog. The river where people go every morning. Tonight at midnight. Come alone or she dies. A chill spider walked up Hadrian's spine. This wasn't some lame teenage prank. This was serious. His hands shook as he read and reread the words, committing them to memory before ripping the note into tiny shreds. He couldn't risk his grandparents or anyone else finding out and putting Harper in more danger. $10,000. It may as well have been 10 million. Hadrian was just a broke college student crashing with his family for the summer, barely scraping by on his meager tutoring earnings. He had nowhere near that kind of cash. A sob built in his throat. This was an impossible demand. He couldn't meet it. Harper was doomed.
No.
Hadrian squared his shoulders. He refused to give up on her that easily. He didn't have the money, but he did have his brains, honed by years of designing robotics with Ambrose. If he couldn't outbid the kidnapper, he'd have to outsmart them. The rest of that day passed in a flurry of preparation. Hadrian emptied his bank account at the ATM, just a few $100, and placed the bills in a black duffel bag. Then he rigged up a GPS tracking device, something he and Ambrose had tinkered with last summer. If he could plant this on the kidnapper, maybe it would lead him to Harper. He also packed a flashlight, a Swiss Army knife, and his cell phone, fully charged. As midnight approached, Hadrian changed into dark clothes and black sneakers. He debated calling the police, but feared the kidnapper might be monitoring him somehow, making sure he followed instructions. He'd have to handle this alone. Steeling himself, he crept out of the house, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The woods were pitch black and deathly silent as Hadrian made his way down the jogging path. Thin clouds scudded across the moon, making the darkness shift and undulate. A clammy sweat broke out across his back despite the night chill. The icy fingers of dread trailed up his neck. He had the unnerving sensation of being watched. At exactly midnight, Hadrian arrived at the designated meeting spot by the river. He stilled, heart pounding, barely daring to breathe. He strained his eyes and ears for any sign of Harper or the kidnapper, but perceived only inky shadows and rushing water. "I'm here," he called out hoarsely. "I brought the cash. Now where's my dog?" Silence. The night seemed to mock him. Then a voice, deep and distorted, split the air. "Set the bag on the ground and back away." Hadrian whipped his head toward the sound but saw no one. The kidnapper must be using some kind of voice modulator. "Not until I see Harper," Hadrian demanded, desperation making him brave and a little stupid. "You're in no position to make demands." The voice boomed, harsher now. "Do as I say or your precious pup gets a bullet to the head." Terror turned Hadrian's muscles to water. He had no choice but to comply. Keeping one hand raised in capitulation, he slowly bent and placed the duffel bag on a large flat rock. Then he backed up several paces, stumbling a bit in the dark. "There, I did it. The money's all there. Now let Harper go. Please." A low chuckle rippled from the disembodied voice, raising the hair on Hadrian's arms. "Did you really think this was about the money? Oh, Hadrian. So naive." Ice crystallized in Hadrian's gut. The way the kidnapper said his name. So familiar, like they knew him. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" Hadrian's own voice shook. "You'll find out soon enough," the kidnapper rasped. "But first, a little surprise. Look to your left, by the big oak tree." Against all better judgment, Hadrian obeyed. There, wedged between two gnarled roots, was what appeared to be a remote control. With a trembling hand, he picked it up and saw a piece of duct tape on the back that read, "Press me." Heart slamming against his ribs, Hadrian depressed the single red button. Instantly, a piercing screech knifed through the night. Sounded like a dog in pain. "Harper!" Hadrian shouted. Without regard for his own safety, he hurtled toward the awful noise, all thoughts of catching the kidnapper abandoned. He had to get to Harper. The sound grew louder as Hadrian crashed through the brush. The back of his neck prickled. Something wasn't right. When he finally reached a small clearing, he stopped short, while surging into his throat. There was Harper, but not Harper. It was a laptop playing a recording of a dog's yelp on a loop. And propped on a log beside it, bathed in the laptop's sickly blue glow, was a bone. No, Hadrian realized as he moved closer, not a bone. A fake bone. Like the props at the old Benjamin Carteret Drama Center his grandmother used to run. Printed on its side in smudgy black ink was FRBCVDC store. Before Hadrian could make sense of it, the recording cut off abruptly and a new noise shattered the ensuing silence. The unmistakable click of a gun being cocked. "Don't move," a voice commanded behind him. A human voice this time, no modulator. Female, dripping with malice, yet strangely familiar. Hadrian's blood turned to slush as he put it together. The bogus cash drop. the drama club prop, that voice. It all pointed to one person. Mrs. Tanner? Hadrian croaked. Very slowly, he pivoted to face her. What? Why? His surrogate second mother emerged from the shadows, a pistol aimed at Hadrian's chest. In the faint moonlight, Hadrian could see she looked different, grotesque almost. Lips bloated with filler, skin pulled too tight, false lashes clumped together. You have to pay for what you did to my son, Margaret hissed. You broke his heart so he'd leave town, so he'd leave me. You ruined everything. Her voice rose to an unhinged shriek. What? No, Hadrian sputtered, mind reeling. I never meant to. Ambrose left on his own. For his career. It wasn't. Don't lie to me, Margaret snarled. I read his journal. He was devastated when you cheated on him and dumped him. You gutted him. Cheated, Hadrian echoed weakly. I never. And then it hit him. The misunderstanding. The fight. Ambrose walking in on him with his study partner and jumping to conclusions. Refusing to let Hadrian explain. Something inside him cracked. This psychotic woman had put him through hell, kidnapped his dog, all over an imagined slight. Grief and rage burned through him like poison. Where is Harper? Margaret's gruesome face contorted in a savage grin. You really shouldn't let your pets wander off leash. You never know what might happen to them. Terror and fury blurred Hadrian's vision. He lunged forward without conscious thought, a primal roar erupting from him. Margaret's eyes popped wide and her finger jerked on the trigger. The gun blast split the night. White-hot agony exploded in Hadrian's left shoulder, knocking him breathless. He crashed to his knees as Margaret cackled madly above him. But even as the pain threatened to subsume him, his brain latched onto a sudden, terrible realization. If Margaret had shot him, that meant her aim was no longer true. Now was his chance. Gritting his teeth against a crimson wave of torture, Hadrian surged upward and knocked the gun from Margaret's bony grip, clattered away into the darkness. Then he leveraged his greater height and strength to bear her flailing body to the ground, pinning her there with his knee on her chest. She screamed and spat and bucked against him. It's over, you crazy bitch, Hadrian growled. You're going to jail for a long, long time. As if on cue, sirens and flashing red and blue lights split the night. The police, Hadrian realized dimly. Someone must have heard the gunshot and called 911. What happened next was a pained blur. Uniformed officers swarming the clearing, grabbing a still shrieking Margaret. Paramedics strapping Hadrian to a gurney. Him telling everyone to forget him, go find Harper before he passed out. He awoke in a sterile hospital room to the one sight he most desperately craved and least expected. Ambrose, exhausted and rumpled, slumped in a chair by his bed. Harper curled on the floor at his feet. Harper, Hadrian croaked, not daring to believe it. Ambrose, at the sound of his voice, Harper leapt up onto the bed, whining and wiggling with joy. Ambrose jerked awake, eyes widening as they met Hadrian's. Oh my God, H, you're okay, Ambrose said hoarsely. I was so scared. What? How? Hadrian struggled to sit up, hissing as the movement jostled his bandaged shoulder. Easy. Ambrose moved to help, careful hands guiding Hadrian back against the pillows. His blue eyes swam with tears. Harper's fine. Mom hadn't hurt her, and the police have Mom in custody. He shook his head, devastated. I'm so sorry, H. I had no idea she would. I never imagined. Hadrian reached out to grasp Ambrose's hand, voice thick. Not your fault. You didn't make her do this. I'm just glad Harper's safe. He stroked the dog's silky head as she whined and licked his face. Ambrose squeezed his fingers, a sob catching in his throat. I'm sorry for everything, for not letting you explain about your classmate, for running away instead of working things out. I never stopped loving you, H. Tears slipped down Hadrian's cheeks. I never stopped loving you either. I forgave you a long time ago. I just want you back. We can start over if you want. In answer, Ambrose leaned down and covered Hadrian's lips with his own. A kiss tender and fierce and brimming with promise. A kiss that tasted of hope and second chances. When he pulled back, he smiled and said, "There's nowhere else I'd rather be." And so, in a bland hospital room reeking of antiseptic, with his beloved dog warming his feet and his cherished love holding his hand, Hadrian McKinnon finally felt like he'd come home.